I'm a Microsoft ASP.NET MVP, and so I run a couple of websites. One of them is highoncoding.com. You can find like podcasts, videos, screencasts, articles, like a lot of stuff posted over there. You can also go to my blog at azamsharp.com. My email is azamsharp@gmail.com, and my Twitter is @azamsharp. So IronRuby is basically a .NET implementation of the Ruby language. So if you have ever used Ruby, this is the .NET world or the .NET side of the Ruby. It's just called IronRuby. Just like Python is a dynamic language, we have IronPython in the .NET world. You just prefix it with Iron, and then it means that it's basically a .NET version of it. So IronRuby is not released yet. It's in 0.9 version. Okay, so don't go use it on production. Not right now, but you can always go ahead and check it out. All right. So why use IronRuby? So, I mean, some of the people ask me that why should I use IronRuby? I'm pretty happy with C#. I'm pretty happy with C++ or VB.NET. It's not really about how you can basically use the language next day or next month. It's basically opening up your mind. C#, VB.NET, all those languages are statically typed languages. So your mind is like static. Okay, you have to write, okay, this is var, this is integer, this is string, anything you write, it's a static code. It has to be compiled into an assembly to execute. Now Ruby is a different language, and I'm going to go to a different route. Like Ruby has many tools that we copy from to the .NET side. Ruby has a tool called RSpec. We copied that in .NET. It's called RSpec in .NET also. So Ruby has many other stuff that is very relevant to a .NET environment. Just like Ruby on Rails is now, when it came to .NET, it became ASP.NET MVC framework. Okay, Java side, JUnit becomes NUnit, and Hibernate became NHibernate. So what we are going to do is we have to installing and configuring IronRuby. Since it's in 0.9 version, it is a little bit tricky to get started or to configure IronRuby to get started with using it. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, or you can also go to my website, and there's a very lengthy tutorial about how you can configure IronRuby. We'll interact with some .NET libraries using IronRuby console. So this is like going from IronRuby or Ruby language and calling .NET API. So, and this one is using C# to interact with IronRuby. So we are also going to go the other way. We are going to use C# code to call IronRuby code or Ruby code and benefit from that. We can also, now who over here knows about testing, unit testing your stuff like NUnit, JUnit, whatever you use. So we are going to use IronRuby code or Ruby code to test our C# code. Okay. We are going to also use behavior-driven development, that is BDD, to test our C# code using Ruby. Writing acceptance test, we'll write acceptance test using Cucumber. That's a very famous tool in the Ruby world. And I don't know if you're familiar with Fit-Fitness. Have you ever used Fit-Fitness? So it's kind of like that. It actually works. It's just the difference is that, right? Writing UI testing. How many of you have actually UI tested, like, okay, ASP.NET Forms, I'll select 3 things from over here, drop down list month, day, year, okay, like my name, like 10 fields, I'll fill it up, all of them, and then press button only to find out that there's some problem. What do? You run it again. You select all the things again, you fill out all the fields again, and then at the end, you press the button again, and then maybe it passes, maybe it fails. So you have to do manually. So I'll tell you how you can use IronRuby to test your ASP.NET application to automate the testing. Now the tool I'm using over here is Vaten. It's actually called Web Application Testing in .NET. This is basically not to be used with IronRuby, because if you're using Ruby, you should use Water, which is Web Application tool in Ruby. Unfortunately, IronRuby doesn't work with Water right now. So I'm using the .NET version of it. It's called Waten. I'm not going to cover this, but I'll explain what Rake is and how it can actually benefit you from not writing all that NAND code and XML to auto-build your solution and to check out your solution. And we're going to just talk about Ruby gems at the end if if I ever get the time to reach that. So let's start with that. So let's start the assembly. Okay. Couple of things. You need to download IronRuby. For that, you will have to use msys-git. Okay. Do I have that or do I not have that? So msys-git is a free version. Just point to any of your folder in Windows folder and just go and say git bash here. Git is basically a distributed source control, and everyone can see this, right? Small room. Okay. So Git is basically a distributed source control. What actually happens is that you upload your source, whatever your application is, to a common repository. It's all on the net, and you just upload it over there, and you can download it. It's free. Everyone can use it. It's pretty good. Now to download the code for Ruby, you just say git clone and some URL. You provide some URL over here which ends with git. So in our case, it will be something like github.com/ironruby/ironruby.git. So if you type that, it start downloading the IronRuby framework 0.9 version, which is the latest version. You can check out this command on High Coding. It's pretty much what I wrote. I think it's like you have to add HTTP or something. But once you run this command, you will have a folder like this, IronRuby folder. And basically your IronRuby is downloaded. If you browse through this folder, you'll find a solution file. You'll pull up the solution in Visual Studio 2008. You build the solution. As soon as you build the solution, you'll have IronRuby installed on your machine. Okay? So you have to build it yourself, since it's 0.9. But that doesn't work because you have to also set up the environment variables. And the IronRuby team is very helpful, and they told me that you can actually run this. There's a command, there's a file called dev.bat. Inside the IronRuby folder, you can run that, and that will set up your environment. But that didn't work for me, so I have to manually go into the environment variables and set up the path. This is all covered in the articles. If I go over here, somewhere in the middle. So this is the first one. You can see Ruby. This is the Ruby. This is the actual Ruby language. This is not IronRuby. And if I go ahead a little bit more, here we go. So this is the IronRuby implementation. So IronRuby is also stored. The path is actually stored. So why I stored the path? I stored the path because IronRuby required a configuration file. It's called ir.config.exe, which contains all the information to run the IronRuby language, like the library path, the gem path, and all this stuff. So you can use that to basically to run it. So once you got configured, I'm just going to go to this folder. Okay. So now, if I type ir.exe, I will be connected to the IronRuby console. So now I am on the console. There we go. And I can do some other stuff like 3 + 2 is 5. So IronRuby is right now running on my machine, and I can see the result right now. And for the rest of the session, I'll be doing different kind of addition, subtraction, like for 1 hour. Anyway. So now, but this is not cool. We need to interact with the .NET environment, right? So how do I interact with .NET environment using IronRuby? The first thing you need to do is you need to say that, okay, which assembly you want to interact with. So I'm using system.windows.forms, which is basically your desktop application, your web, the desktop WinForms application, and I can also say I include the namespace so that I don't have to type all system.windows.forms.form. Now I can only type form, and then it will work. I can say form.new, so my form has been initialized, and I can also assign some text to it, like Houston, TechFest 2009, and I can also